Theresia's been waiting very patiently here to present, and she's probably the most nervous person here today, so I hope you'll give her lots of warmth and attention. Theresia is the head shelter vet at the Animal Welfare League of Queensland and is overcoming her nerves to come and talk to us about a euthanasia protocol that she's put in place to try to help alleviate the suffering of both the people who have to do the job and particularly the animals involved. So thanks, Theresia.
Okay, well, my presentation this afternoon is minimising stress and anxiety during euthanasia, but it could quite easily be retold minimising burnout, because I think euthanasia, and particularly of cats, is one of the most stressful things that any shelter worker and any shelter vet's got to do. So we looked at this quite closely a few years ago, found that particularly cat euthanasia was one of our main sources of stress, and decided to have a look and see what alternatives were available for sedation. At that stage there weren't many, so we had to be a bit resourceful and think up of our own. So this is a presentation of what we came up with by putting our heads together. So sedation of animals is used wherever possible prior to euthanasia. There's a few exceptions to that. The main ones are perinatal pups and kittens. The reason we don't sedate those is because the sedatives that we're using are subcutaneous, and these little animals are often either unconscious or quite comatose, and their peripheral circulation is so bad that they wouldn't absorb the sedative in any sort of time frame to alleviate their suffering. Birds we tend to do with an intra-abdominal injection of sodium pentobarbital, and they don't tend to have anywhere near, or well, don't really tend to have a pain response at all to that. Pinky rats and mice, once again, are quite small. Giving them a subcutaneous or an intramuscular injection would probably be a lot more painful than simply doing an intra-abdominal injection of the sodium pentobarbital. And we find that, well, the main reason we're doing this is to minimise the stress on the animals. So we'll go straight into sedating cats, which was the big challenge because there wasn't really much available. We looked at a few different things like acepromazine, which we found worked well in some cats, not so well in others, and only partially in most. Xylozine's another good one, but it does cause vomiting, and it really, really drops the cat's blood pressure, which makes it really hard, particularly for a trained lethalist, i.e. not a vet, to find a vein once they've been given a large dose of xylazil. In private practice previously, I'd learnt about the use of Zolotil subcutaneously, but we've combined that with Hypnoval in equal doses so that we can give it subcutaneously. And this is a table which is also in your notes displaying the amount that we give and the costs involved. Go straight on to the advantages. The reason we're using Hypnoval and Zolotil is that it doesn't involve a restricted drug, therefore it can be given by a lethalist and it does not require a vet. Ketamine, as you know, is a restricted drug and records need to be kept, and it can only be administered by a vet. The reason we want to give it subcutaneously is because intramuscular injections are very painful for cats, and by giving it subcutaneously we're minimising the cat stress there, but also the lethalist stress of giving an intramuscular injection. The Hypnoval and Zolotil combination gives full anaesthesia, and the animal is able to recover from it if need be. In most cases, with old or sick cats being the main exception, because their body's generally not able to cope with an anaesthetic, let alone a fairly heavy one like the Zolotil combination. It does maintain blood pressure really well, and it has a very rapid onset of action, in most cases less than 5 minutes. We use Hypnoval in combination with the Zolotil because Zolotil by itself causes quite a bit of disorientation, which in private practice we didn't find to be a problem because most of the cats we were euthanasing were quite old and quite sick. whereas a lot of the ones that we euthanize in a shelter are aggressive or being euthanized for some other reason and are often quite young and quite healthy, apart from their behavioural problems. So we added them Hypnoval at equal volume ratios so that we didn't get that disorientation, which was quite stressing for the staff. The disadvantages of the combination are that it is quite costly. I'll just go back. So you can see the cost there. So for a very large cat, you're looking at $3.80. However, this amount of gain that you get in reducing the stress for the cat and also for the person who's having to do the euthanasia, I think far, far outweighs the sort of moderate cost that you're adding to the process of euthanasia there. The other disadvantage is that it needs to be buffered in kittens and juveniles because it does tend to sting. The sting's equivalent to subcutaneous injection of xylazine. In the adults, we often don't buffer it because much like xylazine in adults, it doesn't sting as much. For dogs, we sedate them with orally with ACP tablets, acepromazine maleate, if possible. If we've got a dog who's quite anxious or aggressive, we tend to add phenobarbital to that, ideally given the night before, which, because it's an anti-epileptic, but it has sedative side effects, so it increases the amount of sedation we get from acepromazine. If we have a very aggressive dog that needs to be caught with a catching pole, then we give it an injection of xylazine and ketamine, and that's done by the vets, which then produces full anaesthesia so that we can safely euthanize it. The dose rates are there. They're also in your notes, so I won't dwell on those. The advantages are that it's quite cheap, particularly if you're only doing oral sedation, and the amount of sedation you can get with ACP tablets is a real advantage to the dog. They really don't stress as much being brought through the rows or being restrained and that sort of thing. And the fact that it can be given orally in most dogs is terrific as well, because often these dogs are a bit scared and handling them more than what you have to stresses them out even more. The disadvantages are that you need to ensure that the tablets are eaten, which can sometimes be a problem in small breeds or stressed dogs. We tend to do them first thing in the morning before they have their main meal of the day, so they're hungry, and we tend to pop them in a bit of canned food, which most of them tend to eat quite well. And ketamine, once again, is a restricted drug, so it needs to be administered by a vet for those more aggressive dogs. We also, from time to time, have to euthanize rabbits and rodents. So in conjunction with David Vella, we've come up with a sedation protocol for those. Once again, this is xylazine ketamine, so it needs to be administered by a vet, and we give it intraperitoneally. I find that the best spot to give it is on the right side under the ribs, aiming for the liver. It tends to be most effective, fastest there. There's a table in your notes regarding how much we give. The sedation usually takes 5 to 10 minutes in those animals. The advantages are that you're doing a non-irritant intraperitoneal injection, so there's no pain involved with it. And the xylazine ketamine is a full anaesthetic, so by the time that they're then euthanized, they're already fully anaesthetised. And it's less hazardous to handle than gaseous sedation, and you don't need to have a gas box to gas those animals down. The disadvantage is, once again, ketamine's a restricted drug, so it's vet-only use. Just a few tips, tricks and techniques of the trade for those of us who do the practical side of things. If you're injecting one of the cat for pre-euthanasia sedation, always face them into the carrier and make the carrier nice and dark. That way, because we're often sedating cats that are a little bit aggressive or very, very anxious, if they jump, they're going to jump back into the carrier, and it's safest for all concerned. If we're transferring a highly stressed or aggressive cat from a carrier to a feral trap, always make the destination darker. As you can see, there's a big sheet draped over that feral trap and a light coloured carrier so that they transfer easily. There's a device called an Easy Nabber, which is available, which is a netting type enclosure. It's just a terrific device for restraining cats. They can just be caught in the two jaws of that net, and they're then giving an intramuscular injection while they're being gently restrained with a towel over the top, which makes it much safer. And we don't use intraperitoneal injections of lethabarb unless the animal's fully anaesthetised, with the exceptions of those that I've spoken about previously. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Theresia.